Welcome back to Face the Nation. We're joined now by the head of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde. The ECB sets interest rates for many countries in the European Union, which is America's largest trading partner. It's great to have you here.
Great to be here, Margaret.
Well, particularly in this moment in time where there is confusion over what happens next with global trade. I saw that the Chancellor of Germany, Germany's the biggest economy in Europe, he came out and said tariffs harm everyone. The biggest poison for the economies of Europe and the US is this uncertainty about tariffs. Did you hear and get any clarity from Ambassador Greer about what's going to happen next?
I'm not so sure. And I tell you, I think it's critically important that all people in the trade, both outside of the United States, but also in the United States, have clarity about the future of the relationships. Because it's a bit like driving. You want to know the rules of the road before you get in the car. It's the same with trade. It's the same with investment. You want to know what the rules are. And you want to avoid having to, come back and claim tariffs back, because this is just not the purpose of people doing business. They want to do business. They don't want to go into legal lawsuits. So I hope it's going to be clarified and it's going to be sufficiently thought through so that we don't have, again, more challenges, and the proposals will be in compliance with the Constitution, in compliance with the law.
Mm-hmm. Well, what you just said sounded very similar to what one of the justices raised. I think it was Justice Gorsuch saying, like, that's why there is the call to put things in law so that there is clarity for planning ahead. I didn't hear Ambassador Greer say with any certainty that they're going to try to put any of these things in law. Just use existing regulations is what I heard him say. But he did seem certain that the existing trade deals will hold. The EU and the US do have an agreement, 15% tariff ceiling in a recent trade deal, but there's an emergency meeting about all this tomorrow. Do you see that as disruptive, that this could be in jeopardy, in fact?
I'm no longer trade minister.
Right.
I used to be, so I don't know what the outcome of those meetings will be. But it's not as if it was sort of straightforward, 15% across the boards. There are also exemptions. There are carve-outs. There are areas for which there is no tariffs. So I think if it shakes the whole equilibrium, which people in the trade had got used to because they continued trading after the April decisions and the July trade arrangement between the US and Europe. But to sort of shake it up again is going to bring about disruptions in the business, for sure.
Well, when you were last here in October, and I asked you about the impact of the tariffs, you said the global economy had not yet felt the pain. Did we avoid that pain? Did the consumer avoid the pain?
I don't think the consumers avoided the pain. And I think that there are many studies that are being completed now to determine what is the impact and where is the burden of tariffs. And I think that while some exporters have borne some of the brunt, most of it was borne by the US importers and eventually the US consumers, because the US importers have squeezed their margins a bit to absorb some of these additional costs due to tariffs. But there is a point where you don't squeeze your margins so much and you have to pass it on to the consumers. I think this is what we are beginning to see, and multiple studies and very serious people are looking into this. We are trying to look at the data ourselves to make sure what impact it has on trade and on our economies. And this is a continuous process, which is clearly going to be a bit disrupted by the current development.
I want to ask you about, as a central banker, your thoughts on some of the populism we're seeing right now. You took a lead role in defending Chair Powell, Jerome Powell, here in the United States, after President Trump's Justice Department launched an investigation into him. You said it was critical to preserve the independence of central banks with full respect for the rule of law and democratic accountability. We know Powell is set to be replaced in May by Kevin Warsh, someone you also know from your time as trade minister. Do you believe that he personally can resist political pressure from the president?
First of all, I have enormous respect, as you know, for Powell, for Kevin Walsh, and for Fed chairs in the past. And I'm very proud to receive an award tomorrow in the name of Paul Volcker. Mm-hmm. You know, for monetary policy, the rule of law is critically important. And the independence of a central bank is critically important. We have seen in history, we have seen in literature, we have seen in just anything that analyzes the activity of a central bank, be it the Fed, be it the ECB, that the independence matters a lot. Why is that? Because you don't want someone who sets interest rates, who has in charge price stability and financial stability. You don't want that person to be under political influence. And the decisions that we make generally do not impact right away. They produce an effect 6, 12, 18 months, sometimes 2 years down the road. In the meantime, the political life continues. Mm-hmm. And we have to be, in a way, immune to that. That's why many central bankers around the world signed this support to central bank independence as applied to Chair Powell.
Mm-hmm. It was an incredible statement because usually bankers want to stay out of that spotlight. But you see a real risk here. And there is concern about this populist wave, even in France. The far right could win the French election next year. I have to ask you about these reports that you might be leaving the ECB early because of basically an insurance policy to allow for the French president to select a successor rather than potentially a far right leader helping to select a head.
I'm riveted to a mission. And my mission is price stability, financial stability. I want the euro, which we are custodian of, to be strong and fit for the future. I think we've achieved a lot. Inflation is at target. Growth is okay, not brilliant, but resilient, 1.5%. And unemployment is at the lowest level ever. But we need to consolidate all that. And my baseline is that it will take until the end of my term. And electors in any country in the world make their choices, and those choices have to be respected.
So no, you're not answering on the leaving early, but you think it sounds like it'll take more work till the end of your 8-year term. Christine Lagarde, thank you very much for your time this morning. We'll be right back. We spoke Friday with a bipartisan group of governors, Democrats Laura Kelly of Kansas and Andy Beshear of Kentucky, along with Republicans Mike Braun of Indiana and Ohio's Mike DeWine. The conversation took place before President Trump announced a new 15% global tariff to replace those tariffs struck down by the Supreme Court. We began by asking what impact the ruling might have on their states.
I'm hopeful, optimistic that it will settle some of the issues that we have, particularly in our agricultural industry. They've been hit very, very hard by these tariffs, and I'm hoping that this court decision will reverse some of those and allow them to get back to business again.
Governor Beshear, Kentucky bourbon had been hit hard by those retaliatory tariffs. Yeah. Does this ruling do much for that industry or more broadly for your state?
Yeah, I hope so. Tariffs are a tax on the American people. We've seen studies that show that 90% of these tariffs are being borne by American business. Those are all in our states as well as our people. We've seen parts of the economy slow down because of it. It can add 30% more cost to a major new construction project, which could slow down new jobs coming to our communities. Bourbon's been hit hard, and now this is the second straight time. And this is from a state where both of our U.S. senators and this governor, despite being in different parties, are all against tariffs.
Mm-hmm. Governor Braun, for you, what are you seeing out in Indiana? Because we checked the stats and it looked like your auto and machinery manufacturing have lagged a bit. The Indiana Business Review says your farmers were hit hard by retaliatory tariffs. Is this going to bring relief?
So Indiana's, along with Wisconsin, the two biggest states per capita manufacturing. So tariffs would have been a plus due to the industries that have been kind of hollowed out. You look at Gary, Indiana. That was the second largest city in Indiana. Mm-hmm. Steel goes overseas. I think the key is trade has to be fair and free. And from the Marshall Plan through rebuilding the global economy, we did some things that got that out of balance. I mean, we were in a $1 trillion, give or take, annual deficit in trade, $2 trillion on our fiscal account. That turns you into a debtor nation. So ideally, through reciprocity, you get things down and even, free and fair, and get back on an even playing field. Over those 40, 50 years, it got imbalanced, and I think that's where Trump was coming from.
But the court said he overreached.
Well, that's a constitutional issue, and
yes,
you're going to have to deal with it.
In your state, though, you said you believed this theory that it might actually help bring back some of those manufacturing jobs.
Tariffs,
did you see that it did any of that?
Yes, it was starting. I mean, the amount of investment that's coming back to this country that whooshed out of it, that created chronic trade deficits, that needs to be rectified. And you can do that through tariffs. You can do it through trade negotiations. And we were going the wrong way for a long time.
So you think this is a negative?
I think there are going to be other ways to continue what's already occurred. It'll be interesting with the countries they've already done deals with, whether they'll try to renege.
Right.
I got a feeling a lot of them will stay put with the trade deals they put in place.
Governor DeWine, for you in Ohio, the Cleveland Fed said the tariffs drove price increases across multiple sectors in your state, including in manufacturing and including in retail. Do you believe their analysis, or do you believe the president's analysis?
Well, first of all, Margaret, I don't think we know what's going to happen.
Now, after this ruling.
You know, look, the president, I'm sure, is going to look for any way he can to basically go back and do this.
He pretty much said that, right?
One of the dissents certainly said he had the authority to do it. We'll have to see. So I don't think anybody knows. It's been mixed for us. I think, you know, for agriculture, particularly soybeans, for example, it was not helpful. But we are a manufacturing state, and I think one of the things that we learned, all of us who were governors at the time during COVID, is that the supply chains, we got to make more. We're broken. We have to make more things back here in the United States. But I think that's a general feeling of the public. So I think as a manufacturing state, you know, we're seeing some new investment coming in. It's hard to tell sometimes. Do you attribute it to the fact that they now have to be investing more and don't want to have the tariffs or not? But my feeling is that we're getting a lot that's coming in frankly, because of those tariffs.
Margaret, my hope is that this decision stops the chaos in how these tariffs are being implemented, because business needs stability, trade needs stability. And if a president can wield this authority that he was trying to, then you see the chaos we've seen, where we had first across the board, then reciprocal tariffs, then industry-specific tariffs, then we had tariffs on a country for non-economic reasons. What this should say is the president has to go to Congress. We have former members of Congress here, and actually work it through in a thoughtful way.
And what I'd like to see is, I do think there are ways that the president can work around this and get where he wants to go on tariffs. I'm hoping, though, that the approach will be, what about his tariff policy before worked, you know, in the manufacturing arena, for instance, but where did it not work? And be very careful when you're looking at what impact it has on small businesses and agriculture. So I hope whatever comes next is more thoughtful.
I want to ask you about another big issue many of you are facing, and that is how to deal with immigration and immigration policy as it affects your states. Governor Kelly, you're a Democrat, but you did sign a bill to get state law enforcement to work with federal authorities when it comes to immigration enforcement. And one of the complaints is often that having local authorities involved is a drain on their resources, or it's a distraction for them. Why isn't that the case in your state?
Oh, I didn't say it wasn't. We haven't.
You think that cooperation is a drain on locals?
I think when ICE comes into your state, that it creates some problems, and creates some problems for your local law enforcement, because it's sort of a who's on first, who's in charge here. And I think that's been a problem. My approach has always been, you know, when we work with the federal government on anything, whether it's disaster relief or with our National Guard, you know, we look for ways to cooperate and partner. That's what we want to see, if they're going to come in and try to do immigration enforcement in our state.
Governor Beshear, in your state, the Republican legislators want to pass a bill to force the state to work with ICE, as I understand it. You're not a fan of this idea.
We'll
Why?
see what happens in my state legislature, because at the end of, I think, last week, 2 of our Republican senators got up on the Senate floor and talked about how they thought this immigration enforcement had gone too far. For me, I believe that border security is national security, and we needed to tighten our borders. We also have to enforce our laws as a nation, but how we do it shows our humanity or our lack thereof. Shackling people's legs, putting them in cages that we would not put animals in is wrong. And
Where have you seen that?
Well, you see it in the pictures coming out of the Alligator Alcatraz or other facilities. We read about kids getting sick and not getting the health care they need in the Texas facility. But the tactics of ICE show that there is a significant training problem. Far too aggressive, and there is now an American body count. They believe they can go into an American citizen's home with just an administrative warrant. They cannot. So I've called for the retraining of all ICE agents. And in the meantime, if they think there's a violent criminal in Kentucky illegally, send us his or her name. We'll go get him.
You're talking there about administrative versus judicial warrants and the ability to enter. Do you then appreciate what's happening here in Washington with Democrats cutting off some of that short-term funding for Homeland Security on that issue along with others?
I do, and I wish we didn't have to be at this point, but we have an American body count. We have at least 2 ICE agents that are being investigated for perjury. We have others, Americans that have been injured or hurt that shouldn't have been. I was the top law enforcement official in Kentucky. I've never seen a law enforcement agency, state, local, or federal, act with the same tactics that ICE does. And these are on our streets. These are in our cities.
They would argue that the amount of immigration was at such unprecedented levels that new operational things had to be adapted. That's what the administration argues, right? That they have to do the tough business now. You're not buying it.
Watch the videos. This is not how law enforcement acts. This is not respecting our rights as Americans. It's wrong.
Governor DeWine, in Ohio, your state has been the focus of the Trump-Vance campaign during 2024 and of their administration now, particularly the Haitians that you have, tens of thousands in the state of Ohio. You said this week ICE has not been clear on when they're going to surge to your state. Did you bring that up when you were at the White House?
I did not. I didn't have the opportunity to do that. Look, Margaret, my position has been very clear in regard to TPS for Haitians. I think
temporary protected status,
yes,
which the president is trying to revoke
now. I think the policy to revoke that is wrong. I think there's a consensus in this country, as we all have said, let's get rid of the violent offenders, get them out of here. I think there's a consensus behind the need to do a good job on the border, and I think the president gets high marks for doing that on the border. But once you get beyond that, I don't think there's a consensus for taking people who are working, who are supporting their family. And we've kind of seen it in almost in a micro way with the Haitian community that's come into Springfield. Springfield is an industrial city, manufacturing city that was down. It has been coming back. And frankly, one of the reasons it's coming back is because of the Haitians who are working there. These are people who, if you talk to the employers, they were filling jobs that were not being able to be filled in any other way. So it's been a big boost to the economy. So if one day they know that TPS is taken away, no employer can hire them anymore. And so you got to have all these people who are unemployed. So I think the policy there is wrong. If I could just say this, I think that this is a real opportunity for the president in regard to immigration, probably after the election, because nothing's going to get done before
the midterms of 2026.
That's right. I think the president has a chance to do something that no president has done for 4 decades. If he would take that opportunity, and I think after the election he'll have a chance.
Governor Braun, Indiana also had exceptionally high levels of immigration in recent years when we checked the data. According to the Census Bureau, nearly 10% of your labor force are immigrants. What are the president's policies doing? Are you having a similar experience to Governor DeWine?
So Indiana, among the peer states, has the lowest unemployment rate, and we've got the highest economic growth rate, too. That's due to certain policies. But let's get back to the border. It was the same legislative template under the prior administration that encouraged tens of millions to come into the country. So just like when we were talking about the trade issues, go back to the source of why it occurred. Here, it was bad policy, calculated, I think, in a very political way to maybe think it's going to benefit you down the road electorally. Put that aside. That's a whole other issue. I think,
Sorry,
though.
just to be clear here, you're not talking about illegal people who cannot vote.
No, I'm talking about how the census is determined, how your congressional districts are put together. Mm-hmm. All I can tell you, it was a mess in those 4 years. Mm-hmm. And the same legislative template was in place during the Biden administration that the Trump administration has used. I think everybody agrees that we've got to have border security. And what we're hearing here is that immigration is definitely important. Legal immigration.
Right.
And the country was built upon immigrants. And when you're in a state like ours where you're constantly looking for a workforce, you need to do it. There was even a conversation in an executive session at the NGA about governors getting more involved in work permits and bringing people in, coordinated. You know, that I think that's a good idea.
But just to put a button on it, because I don't want us to speak past each other, what Governor DeWine was talking about was legal immigration and people with legal status, temporary protected status, not people who were
No, I know that.
crossing
And I think we all agree on legal immigration. All I'm citing...
But you would like to keep that temporary protected status?
If that was something that was aimed at a particular workforce need, yes, it occurred. So I think you have to respect it. But I think it was all part of a really kind of chaotic approach that allowed a lot of illegal immigration to come across. That's what we're dealing now with ICE enforcement. And I agree, too. That's got to be done in a way that has humanity to it.
You can catch our full conversation with the governors on our website and our YouTube page. We'll be back in a moment. Some breaking news now. The U.S. Olympic men's hockey team bested Canada in overtime 2-1 to claim the gold medal for the first time in that event since 1980. That's it for us today. Thank you all for watching. Until next week. For Face the Nation, I'm Margaret Brennan.